Keanu, man, run. Hey there everyone, Afrodo Reviews here, helping you determine, is that book worth reading over second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? I'm being dramatic, let me be dramatic. Today's book is How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days, written by K.M. Jackson and published on November 2nd, 2021. Don't know why I keep trying to say 1990. Apart from what I just told you, there really isn't much to say about this book, all things considered. It's relatively new, and the reception that it received, I'll just let the report card speak for itself. So, here's the report card. Kind of wish I had read those first before I got excited about this book. But anyways, let's get ahead of ourselves. On to my review. We'll do it how we always do. First, we start with the cover. And quite frankly, the cover for this book is pretty. I really like this cover. It's nice. I love the art style of our main character, Bethany Lou Carlisle. I like just the general style of it. I like the colors on this. It's very nice, warm. I love that little background of the sketch art of New York City. It's honestly just a really great cover. The back is blank, which normally for dust covers like this, they put accolades on the back, but considering the report card, obviously the book didn't have very many of those. And, general inside, synopsis is on this side, about the author on this side. With that out of the way, let's move on to the synopsis. The synopsis for this book I already read on my TBR. For those of you who want to see me read directly from the synopsis, feel free to check that out. I would recommend checking out the video anyways, because it'll give you a basic idea what I'm going to do later on in the month as well. But for those of you who just want a dirty synopsis real quick, the book is basically about a woman named Bethany Lou Carlisle going out with her best friend, Truman Erickson, who goes by True for some reason, because that nickname is just really weird to me. That's one of the most minor nitpicks I have about this book. Going out with her best friend, Truman Erickson, who has one of the most obvious crushes on her, as they attempt to sabotage, or not really sabotage, but attempt to meet with Keanu Reeves upon the revelation that he's being married in 90 days. And she wants to try to convince Keanu not to marry his fiancée, but to marry her instead, because she has had the biggest crush on him for years. And if she can't convince him to marry her, at least not get married in general, so she and millions of other fans can still have their fantasies about him. And that's pretty much the synopsis of the book. I'm going to have to... Okay, so I'm going to get into the review next, but when I get in the review, I want it to be very clear. This book is going to be hard to talk about without going into spoilers, so this is just your general spoiler warning from here on out. I'm also going to be discussing a couple more controversial topics, but nothing I really think needs a trigger warning. Just, again, fair warning. So, how to talk about this book? Well, the easiest way I can describe this book to anyone who is curious is, think of it like this. So think back on your childhood, or think back on your friend group if you are still in high school or somehow middle school and watching my channel. Now really think about it. Everyone has that one friend. You know the friend, the one that has a celebrity crush, but it's not a normal celebrity crush like most people have. Where we have that crush on that person, but we know it's never really going to work out, and it's kind of just something like, if it worked out it'd be amazing, but we aren't delusional about it. But there's that one person who is. That one person that's convinced that if they just met their celebrity crush once, even just on passing he notices her in the crowd, or notices him in the crowd, because, men do have that too. Or they just sit down and have that one genuine conversation together. All of a sudden, that celebrity crush is going to suddenly, "Where have you been all my life, my true love? Come with me." And that's, they genuinely believe that. Most of the time, they'll grow out of it. Don't get me wrong. This isn't hate. We were all kids once. We all believe stupid things. They did genuinely believe that at one point. Now imagine that friend is telling you a self-insert fan fiction where she goes out to convince her celebrity crush not to get married to their fiancé, but marry her instead. That's how this book reads. This book, if for all intents and purposes, feels like it's not, I'm not saying it is, but it feels like someone writing their own self-insert fan fiction where they convince a real-life celebrity to marry them. And my point extends beyond the simple premise of this book. It's not just that it's a story about a woman trying to convince her celebrity crush to fall in love with her and marry her. It's just the things that also happen within this book. Our main character, Bethany Lou Carlisle. Quick warning, she prefers to be called Lou, but I'm going to call her Bethany because her and true name, when you say them back to back, it's really hard to just pick it out if you're not paying very much attention. So from now on, I'm going to call her Bethany Lou as opposed to just Lou. So I'm going to refer to her friend True as True. But anyways, it reads like someone living a fantasy life within their own book. It's the main character is the daughter of a rich person who's never had a struggle in her life. She's got a high-end apartment for extremely cheap. She's living her dream job as an artist with her best friend as her manager and her other best friend living one floor down. And also she clearly has a crush on him. And it's just one of those, she's already living this fantasy life that some of us envision. Now factor that into the events of the book, where not only is she going after Keanu Reeves to get him to marry her, but there's several instances where they meet other celebrities, and it just feels like, I don't think you're living in the realm of reality, sweetheart.
And about 2 hours into the party, I want there to be a moment where I see Jimmy Jr. across the room and are pulled toward each other. We meet under the disco ball, and we kiss until our bodies and souls become one.
Okay. Because, okay, so there's the subtle one, like Ben Stiller walking by her on a red carpet and stopping to wink at her as he goes by. Okay, that could happen. That is completely within the realm of possibility. But then you have her meeting Chris Evans in a bathroom after she sobbed her eyes out. The two of them having a very heartfelt talk, becoming friends. And it turns out Chris Evans shares her obsessive crush on Keanu Reeves almost. Not really, but like he jokes around like, oh yeah, well, obviously it's Keanu Reeves. Who doesn't want to marry him? But not just that. It's also, they run into Jason Momoa and his wife at a hotel while checking in, and a small brief conversation they have in a parking lot results in Jason Momoa liking them so much that he brings them homemade fish kebabs, and his wife gives them homemade wine for free. Okay, so you see what I mean when I say this. This book reads like a fan fiction. Okay, this might have worked. You know, if the main character, say she was 18 to 23, this would work because you're appealing to a young adult audience. You are talking about a character who hasn't quite matured enough to realize how stupid an obsessive celebrity crush really is. You have a character who doesn't quite accept reality as they should have. But the reason this comes off as so uncomfortable at times is because our main characters are 45 years old, or mid-40s. It says mid-40s, we're never given a concrete date. So I started thinking of them as 45. But they're in their mid-40s. Well, Bethany Lou's in her mid-40s. She's the one who's really obsessive. And she hasn't moved past this point where she has an obsessive celebrity crush. And trust me, it is obsessive. This isn't a, oh, well, he's so hot, I'd totally marry him if he asked me out. And it's flat out, I genuinely think if I meet this guy, I can convince him to marry me over a fiancé that he has. The book goes into such deification of Keanu Reeves that it's very uncomfortable. And the book tries to treat it as charming, and it's not. This is actually one of those cases where I'll suggest playing the reverse the gender game, where this is a romantic comedy, partially because a woman is our main character. But if you switch the genders on this and say, let me describe this story to you. Imagine the story was about a man in his mid-40s learning that Sandra Bullock is about to get married in 90 days, has a brief panic attack at the revelation that she's going to get married, and decides to set off with his best friend on a misadventure road trip to find Sandra Bullock, meet with her, and convince her to marry him instead. Or, if he can't do that, convince Sandra Bullock at least not to get married, so that he and millions of men otherwhere can still have their fantasies about her. Yeah, you feel that little uncomfortable tingle up the spine? Yeah. And I'm not do this book dirty. Obviously, the story is somewhat acknowledging of this is a really weird thing. Bethany Lou Carlisle, the story tries to be about more than just convincing Keanu Reeves to marry them. It does treat that as sort of an unobtainable goal at points. Our main character doesn't see it that way, and being 40 plus years old, that's an issue, but the book itself seems aware of that, and tries to have themes of grief, of immaturity, of moving on, of dealing with survivor's guilt, and all that. But it's all such a background to the main crux of this main character has an obsessive crush on Keanu Reeves and is doing everything in their power to act on it. And it would work if this was tied into these themes at any point. Like, okay, the main theme is that the character lost her brother at a younger age. She deals with the grief that comes with losing him, while her best friend, the one who has a crush on her, and the one she obviously has a crush on, deals with the survivor guilt of feeling like he's the one who caused the death, because he was there. And the two of them attempting to move past it. It's revealed later on that in the depths of her depression after his loss, that True took her to a Keanu Reeves movie to try and cheer her up. So when I read this, my first thought was, oh, okay, so she has such an obsessive crush on Keanu Reeves because she saw him at a very low point in her life, and something about that particular movie resonated with her and made her latch onto him as this emotional support. Maybe one of the movies where he's dealing with the loss of a loved one but comes out and learns to accept it. You know, something like that. That makes sense, right? After the movie, she's cheered up. She makes a point of flat out saying, oh, I've had a crush on Keanu Reeves since Point Break. And the movie they went to go see is Speed, I think. So those two things are completely unrelated, and this is why True and Bethany Lou should already be dating, rather than why she has a crush on Keanu Reeves. Alright, whatever. One of the other things that this book does is include small bits of racism here and there. And, okay, when I first saw this, I first saw her describing the racism she suffered as a kid, going to a prestigious private school. My thought was, okay, so they're going to tie that in there. Maybe she saw this at a young age after a particularly bad day, or the day she realized how racist a close friend was, something like that. Maybe that it would tie in. Maybe she saw a movie where Keanu Reeves is, you know, dating a woman of color and never once is her color brought up. Or maybe he treats a person of color in the movie as just a normal person, and again, it's never brought up, causing her to latch onto the idea that Keanu Reeves as a person is this paragon of virtue of acceptance and equality, and that helped her get through the racist periods. No, again, this is one of those things where the racism feels like it was added just to be there, just to remind us that these characters aren't white every so often. It doesn't really tie into any of the major themes of the story, and at most, I can only ever remember it coming up like every so often so they can have a random side character perform a subtle act of racism against them once more to remind you these characters aren't white. Or as they call it, microaggression. For me, I just don't like that word. It has nothing to do about what it means. I just don't like the word microaggression for some reason. So yeah, that's why I don't use that word. Anyways, so yeah, it's just those themes are there. There are themes there that aren't about I have an obsessive celebrity crush. But none of those themes actually matter to the main story at hand. They're just there to be there. They're background filler to what feels like the main story. Finding Keanu Reeves, or exploring the tension between the characters Bethany Lou and Truman Erickson. And, okay, so for those of you who saw my February TBR already, you know that I talked about how I thought this book was almost a YA novel at first. And in my opinion, that book would have worked better. I already kind of went into my reasoning by pointing out that the main character being mid-40s really cast her obsessive crush on Keanu Reeves in a much more I'm digging through your trash and sniffing all your clothing kind of creepy vibe. It's also YA in more ways than just that. It's the way it's written is very young adult in style. It's very juvenile. First of all, one of the main issues I found with this book is that it just tried way too hard. Like, if there's a book I will ever call a try hard, it's this book. It tries way too hard to be funny. It tries way too hard to be modern with all the references. Like, every other thing the character says or references in their narration is either a quote from a movie or a scene from a movie or some kind of meme or even just the slang talk that's even outdated already, like legit or lit or low key or just those kind of things that, you hear kids saying it and you think, oh, well, slang is kind of weird. But when you hear someone in their mid-40s saying it, you're just thinking, just stop, please. It's cringe. Okay, that's the easiest way to describe a lot of this book.
Cringe. There's no other word for it. This makes me cringe. It's embarrassing.
And you might be saying to yourself, okay, well, if it's got all this stuff that makes it seem like a young adult book, Afrodo, are you sure it's just not a young adult book and you're mistaken? Yes, I'm very sure this book is not young adult. And if it is young adult, someone needs to have a conversation with K.M. Jackson because she is not writing for young adults. Within the first 25 pages, there's 2 vibrator jokes and a very detailed description about how Bethany Lou feels some excitement about realizing how handsome Truman, her best friend, is. Yeah, this book is not young adult. Trust me. So yeah, trust me, honestly, this book is over-sexualized quite a bit for a romantic comedy that it's trying to be. But there's also issues with the writing. One such thing, apart from it being very juvenile, another thing is that this book has multiple first-person point of views. And anyone who's watched my channel before knows that I'm not very subtle about the fact that I do not like multiple first-person point of view. In this particular case, this is a perfect example of a book not needing it. In fact, it feels like the multiple first-person point of view was added last minute. The Truman and Bethany Lou are 2 point of view characters. Now, Bethany Lou gets the lion's share of all the POV scenes, but Truman gets a few too. And several chapters of Truman's point of view doesn't feel like it gives us anything that we wouldn't have learned seeing the same thing from Bethany's point of view. In addition, one of the issues that it comes with is there is no difference in the voice of the narrator. Ideally, there should be. On paper, it seems like, oh, this is a match made in heaven. This is a great way to work the multiple first-person point of view. You have Bethany Lou and head in the clouds, lofty, immature woman who has an obsessive crush on a celebrity who tends not to be very connected with reality. And then you have Truman Erickson, a grounded, stable, very much connected to reality person who tries not to get so caught up in all this excitement. So you have 2 very contrasting characters. Now you could work with this. You could tell the chapter from Bethany's point of view and present it one way, the lofty, idealistic, fantasy version, and then you can connect it to Truman's, who tells the same thing, but in a completely different light. A good example is the Chris Evans bathroom scene. In Bethany's point of view, she runs into the men's bathroom sobbing, comes out to find Chris Evans. The 2 have a very nice conversation. Chris Evans even agrees with her crush on Keanu Reeves and says, I totally get why you're doing what you're doing. And the 2 leave off with a very good impression of each other. It was a bit unbelievable. But then tell the same thing from Truman's point of view, where he walks into the men's bathroom after he can't find her, and then finds Chris Evans and Bethany Lou having a conversation together. In contrast to what we've seen, we see Chris Evans say all the same things, but Truman, much more connected with reality, realizes how uncomfortable Chris Evans is. Chris Evans really wants to extricate himself from the situation, but can't find an opening to do so without seeming rude, because he is a major star in the men's bathroom, alone with a woman who's clearly been sobbing. There's accusations that will be thrown around there, even if the intentions were perfectly innocent. So yeah, right there, that was a perfect example of how you could have used these 2 styles together. It doesn't do that. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that the two narrators' voice, there's no difference between them. If there was not that little section in the beginning that says, this is the person who you're currently seeing the POV of, I would put money down that you probably wouldn't realize who's talking. You probably wouldn't even realize that it's multiple first-person point of views. And in addition to that, like I said, Truman's doesn't feel like it was meant to be in there from the onset. There were several times when you get a chapter that could have easily been told from Bethany Lou's point of view. But there's also times where his chapters just get cut short unceremoniously. Like, halfway through his chapter, it'll just cut off and then switch back to Bethany Lou's point of view. Which, for the love of God, if you are going to write a first-person point of view book that has multiple first-person point of views, do not switch mid-chapter. That is one of the worst things you can do, in my opinion, with that kind of thing. Because it's a very disorienting experience. Especially when the narrators speak exactly the same. Alright? Don't do that, please. So all in all, I'm going to have to give this book a 4 out of 10. Yeah, I just don't get who this book is appealing to. It's got super juvenile writing, but is clearly aimed for an adult audience. Its premise doesn't work because Bethany Lou doesn't come off as charming. She comes off as an obsessive fan who's way too immature for her age. There are several themes in here that, while are trying to make the book more than just an obsessive self-insert fanfiction, just don't really do anything because they're so background compared to everything else. They don't feel like they were really thought through. They weren't really connected to anything currently going on. It's just there. Like, it's just one of those, I really don't know who this book was for, except for diehard Keanu Reeves fans who want to see themselves as in Bethany Lou's place. And even then, considering the book doesn't end with her shacking up with Keanu Reeves, which, spoiler alert, I'm sorry, Keanu Reeves is not getting married by the end of the book, you would still have that element of disappointment for it. Because you wouldn't be able to live vicariously through Bethany Lou. Because she doesn't get with Keanu Reeves in the end. So it's just one of those... Oh, and like I said, the deification of Keanu Reeves is very uncomfortable. Maybe it's just because he's a real-life celebrity and it's someone I very much like as a celebrity and acknowledge as a real person. But it gets very uncomfortable very fast. Not in a charming way at all. Like I said... Like sitting outside in the middle of the rain, slowly dragging a knife on your face as you stare into his windows, looking for that brief moment of weakness. I cannot recommend this book. So yeah, I just don't know what else to say about this book. So the real question arises, does it deserve Mount Doom? Yeah. I really don't know who that book was for. I can't recommend it to anyone. And I personally wouldn't recommend anyone go find it and read it. It wasn't a very good read, all things considered. So, that's what I gotta say. Don't seek this one out, guys. As fun as the title sounds, as amazing as that art is, it's not worth a read. And honestly, that really hurts me to say because I was so excited about that book. I literally picked it up sometime in November thinking, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to review this during February and it's going to be a fun book to read. But anyways, moving on. I hope the next book is much better because seriously, it has to hit me with its best Scott. But anyways, with all that said and done, just remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones.